I'll start my story from a doctor's appointment. I was about 5 years old at the time. The doctor kept looking into my mouth and frowning. After the examination, he informed my parents. "The girl is perfectly healthy. She just doesn't talk because she doesn't need to." He wrote it on a piece of paper. My parents were deaf-mute. They were afraid that their disability had somehow passed on to me, but it turned out that I just didn't need to use speech. The doctor added, "If you want the girl to speak, you should rather send her to school." But we were poor, and my parents, because of their peculiarities, had problem with work. And our little village didn't even have a school, because for them, communicating with the outside world was not an easy task. I went shopping, I did household chores, and sometimes I helped with their work. I even fixed my dad's computer myself in the evenings after household chores. I would sit down at the computer and learn what my peers were learning at school. That's how I grew up. Until I was 16. It was on my birthday that my father gathered us around the table. In sign language, he told us the good news. The company had promoted him and wanted us to move to town. It was the best birthday present ever. Imagine a real city with malls and other kids. I was beyond happy and hugged my parents. That same evening, I wrote to the city school I was about to attend. They replied that in order to transfer, I had to take a writing test and prove that my knowledge was appropriate for the class I was going to get in. Next morning, when I checked my mail, I got a positive response. I was accepted. I was jumping up and down on my bed. My new life was starting. That same day, we packed up the car and hit the road. I looked out the window and studied the city where we'd be living. It was not big, but for a girl who just came from a small village, it was a real metropolis, just like New York. I went to school the very next day. Standing in front of the entrance, I took a deep breath and entered this unknown world. I walked to the classroom door, and visibly nervous, I knocked. The teacher invited me in and asked me to stand at the blackboard right in front of the students. "I'd like you guys to meet Joe and Taylor. Tell us all about yourself." I looked at the kids as they prepared to listen intently. I really wanted to say something, but I couldn't open my mouth with fear. Sweat broke out on my forehead with excitement. I suddenly started waving my hands frantically, making it clear that I wasn't going to say anything. The teacher looked at me in surprise. "Yeah, you're embarrassed. Well, take any seat you want." I walked past the kids and took the last seat. I didn't want to draw too much attention to myself. It was uncomfortable to be here. When the bell rang for recess, I was surrounded by my classmates. They asked a lot of questions. "Why aren't you saying anything?" "Strange girl, say something already. Where are you from?" "Maybe she can't talk." Someone even pointed a finger at me, thinking it would help me talk. It was the first time that happened to me, and the students' voices seemed too loud and disgusting to me. My head ached, ready to explode. I jumped up abruptly and ran out of the room. Finally, I slammed the door loudly. I ran down the hallway to get away from all the noise, and suddenly, I saw a door with a sign on it that said, "Pantry." I yanked it open. It was very dark and completely empty. Perfect. I went inside and shut the door behind me. Covering my ears with my hands, I breathed deeply and quickly until the voices of my classmates muffed in my head. I calmed down a little, but then, in the darkness, there was an abrupt "hello" from someone. At the same time, a flashlight turned on and illuminated the girl's pale face. I pressed myself against the wall in fear. The girl continued, "Are you hiding from the sunlight here as well?" I shook my head negatively. "I see. I can't go into the light. I'm from Romania, a descendant of Count Dracula. Light is destructive to me." The strange girl thought about it and asked, "What are you doing here then? Developing photographic film?" I don't know why, but that silly joke made me laugh. "And you're strange," she said. "Just like me. Let's be friends. I'm Alan." Alan held out her hand to me, and I shook it. When we came out of the storeroom, I could get a better look at my new friend. Her skin was pale. She wore only black, and even indoors, she wore dark glasses. I was glad I'd met my friend on the first day. When I got back to class and sat down at my desk, I saw that someone had written the word "freak" on it in huge letters. Naturally, I got very upset, but that wasn't the end of my troubles. The teacher came over. He said I had to go to the principal. The principal started with a question. Miss Taylor, how do you feel about school? I indicated with my hand that I was very well, and Fake smiled. That's what I thought, he said, thoughtfully. I asked for your records, and I know about your parents. You got a high score on the test, but... He paused, after which I tensed. But if you keep being silent, I will have to expel you. Do you understand? I nodded my head, and I walked out of the office. To my surprise, Alan was waiting for me. From there, we walked together. She asked, "Why aren't you talking?" I took a pen and a notebook from her hands and wrote, "I'm afraid I don't know how." The bell rang, and Alan went to class. I decided to go home. The first day of school was awful. At home, my parents asked how it went, and I lied to them that it was amazing. And then I locked myself in my room. I turned on the TV. The movie Titanic was on. Jack was already in the water, and Rose was lying on the door. I laid down on the bed and started repeating her monologue. She was saying, "There's no way I'm giving up Jack. No way." I repeated after Rose, but though my lips were moving, I couldn't make a sound. What if I really can't talk? With that frightening thought, I fell asleep. But the next day, I had to go to school anyway. I had problems with my studies. When the teacher asked me a question or called me to the blackboard, I was as quiet as a fish. This went on for a week until I was called to the principal's office again. His verdict was this: "I'm sorry, Joan, but there is simply no teachers in our school who can teach you." Tears streamed down my cheeks from resentment. Well, I'm sure you'll find another one. Here is a written notice of expulsion." With a trembling hand, I grabbed a piece of paper. "Give it to your parents. You can go now." I jumped out of the office like a bullet. I crumpled the paper with anger and resentment and threw it in the trash like it was a basketball and ran home in tears. In the evening, I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling. I wanted nothing at all. But the sound of the phone's notification pulled me out of my depressing thoughts. I opened it and saw a message from Alan. "I'll see you tonight at the address." I thought, why not? I got ready and left the house. The navigator led me to a house decorated like it was Halloween. I knocked, but no one answered. I pushed the door open. There were arrows pointed on the wall with red paint. If I hadn't known that Alan, Dracula's descendant, lived here, I would have thought I was in the lair of a maniac, and I would have fled immediately. So I decided to play her game. The last arrow pointed at the entrance of the basement. The light on the stairs flickered on and off. I carefully made my way down the stairs, and when I looked around, I was shocked. The basement was dimly lit by candles, and in the very center of it stood a huge coffin with a lid on it. Maybe I should have run back upstairs right away, but I'd been very curious since I was a kid. I walked closer to the coffin. I tried to open it, but I didn't have time, and the lid of the coffin fell to the floor. And a vampire jumped out. A real one, like in horror movies. It hissed and sparkled viciously red eyes. I screamed in shock, and then I staggered back and fell. The vampire was coming towards me while holding out his pale hands. Suddenly, the light in the room was on, and I recognized Alan's face. A friend put on such a realistic makeup that would be envied in Hollywood. I was so angry. "Are you crazy? I almost died of fright." Alan smiled at me, and her joy made me even more angry. "What are you so happy about? I almost had a heart attack." Alan answered, "You have a very beautiful voice." It was only then that I realized what had happened. In a half whisper, slowly trying to taste every word, I repeated, "Are you sick? I almost died." I jumped up, hugged Alan, and while weeping tears of joy, I told her, "You're sick, Alan. You're sick." Alan pointedly pulled away from me. I kept dancing around the vampire's coffin and was shouting different words. I learned how to talk, and under such strange circumstances.